Well, now, there's a rather peculiar question I've always wanted to ask you. Have you ever, in the middle of a day so absurdly busy you can hardly remember your own name, rushing from one meeting to another, chasing deadlines, trying to become that someone the world expects you to be, have you ever suddenly paused and a foolish little thought flickered through your mind? What on earth am I doing? That strange, fleeting feeling, that tiny crack in the routine, is actually a glimmer of truth, because you see, the whole structure we live in, this idea of a separate me, a lonely little creature sealed inside its skin, struggling and striving to win at this thing called life, is in fact a game we've all been hypnotized into taking far too seriously. It's like a shared dream in which everyone insists they're wide awake. And so the purpose of our conversation today isn't to teach you something new. Oh no, it's to gently notice the cracks in that dream together, to explore 7 signs, 7 little aha moments that suggest you may already be waking up. And perhaps most intriguingly, to see why the society that built this game becomes so terribly frightened when you decide to stop playing. So then, where does this game begin? Ah yes, it begins with the main character, the one we all think we know best, I. You see, society, through language, through education, through the lullabies of culture, has been whispering a story into our ears. From the moment we were born, and the story goes something like this: you are a separate self, a lonely little I wrapped up inside a bag of skin. They even have a wonderful term for it. The skin-encapsulated ego, a sort of pilot sitting somewhere between your ears and behind your eyes, busy pulling levers, pressing buttons, making decisions, and believing it's in control. But here's the curious thing: this ego, this little homunculus inside your head, isn't biological at all. You can dissect the brain under the finest microscope and you'll never find it, because it isn't a thing. It's a story. It's a collection of memories, of names, of notions and labels, a social convention, rather like the lines of longitude and latitude drawn on a map. They're useful for orientation, yes, but they don't actually exist on the earth itself. And the ones who designed this game, the institutions we call society, they very much need you to believe that the story is real. Why? Because a world filled with separate, anxious egos, all competing, comparing, and consuming, is a world that can be managed, a world that obeys rules, a world that buys things to ease its unease, and chases goals that someone else has set. It is a marvelous illusion of order, built entirely upon the fantasy of control. But then, and here lies the divine joke, the punchline of the whole cosmic play, the very self we spend our lives trying to improve, to defend, to satisfy, does not exist as a solid object at all. It's a phantom, a mirage shimmering on the surface of consciousness. And the moment you begin to see through that, not just understand it, but feel it in your bones, that is when the game starts to change. That is when awakening begins. So then, how do you know when you've begun to see through the veil? It rarely arrives with a thunderclap or a blinding flash from the heavens. More often, it begins very quietly, delicately, like the first crack of dawn slipping through a dark room. And now, let us look at the signs, 7 ripples of awakening, 7 ways the universe recognizes itself through you. The first sign, perhaps the most disorienting of all, is when time itself begins to collapse. You stop living for tomorrow. You suddenly glimpse a truth so obvious it's almost funny. Life exists only now. The past? It's a wave that has already dissolved upon the shore, a memory replayed in the present moment. It has no separate reality. And the future? It's a mirage, a projection, a shimmering promise, that never quite arrives. Because when it does, it's already now. Yet our entire civilization is built on the denial of this simple truth. It's a vast machine powered by the promise of tomorrow. We're taught to endure today, to sacrifice this living, breathing instant in exchange for a brighter, better future. And so we become like poor little donkeys chasing a carrot, dangling just beyond reach. That carrot has many disguises: a promotion, a bigger house, the quiet paradise of retirement at 65, when perhaps you're too tired to enjoy any of it. And the cosmic joke is this: the stick holding the carrot is tied to your own collar. The faster you run, the faster it moves away, and you never ever arrive, because tomorrow never comes. That's why those who live for the future always seem a little absent. Their bodies are here, but their minds are somewhere else. Their present moment becomes a waiting room, a layover, on the way to someplace better. They suffer from a kind of permanent hunger, a craving for the next thing, the next thrill, the next salvation. But when you begin to awaken, you stop running. You start dancing. You discover something I like to call dynamic relaxation, the art of moving effortlessly with the flow of time, in perfect harmony with its ever-changing rhythm. You realize that the purpose of a symphony isn't to reach the final note. The purpose is to listen, to be completely present for every sound as it unfolds, blooms, and fades. And in that moment, you find a strange kind of wholeness. Everything feels complete. Right here, right now. There's nowhere to rush to, nothing to chase, nothing missing. You are simply here, utterly here, and that, most astonishingly, is all you ever needed to be. And when you begin to rest in the present moment, something quite extraordinary happens. The invisible wall that's been separating you from the world starts to melt away. That old familiar loneliness you've carried for so long begins to dissolve. You go beyond, and I mean beyond, the illusion that you are merely a small, isolated individual. You see, you were never a stranger in this universe, never some lost soul tossed into a foreign world. You are not a wave apart from the ocean. You are the entire ocean, expressing itself for a little while in the shape of a single wave. Your body, your breath, they are continuous with the whole energy of existence. But of course, society has told us quite another story. It has drawn a neat little line right at your skin and declared, inside here, that's you. Everything outside, that's not you. And from that moment, you've been trained to feel like an island, a solitary being, forced to survive, to defend your territory, to fight the endless war of me versus the world. They taught us the virtue of egoism, that the self is the captain of its ship, struggling heroically against the wild sea of circumstance. And we believed it. We swallowed the story whole. We came to feel like travelers in a strange land, souls trapped in biological machines, peering out through two little windows called eyes. But awakening is the moment you suddenly realize you are not a visitor here. You are not in the universe. You are the universe, manifesting right here and right now as a particular point of view. Within this vast flowing field of energy, your body is continuous with the solar system. Your breath is continuous with the atmosphere. You and your surroundings are not two things. You are one continuous process, just as an apple is a function of the apple tree. What you call I, this story you keep telling about yourself, is nothing more than a tiny flag. The entire cosmos is waving for a brief and beautiful instant. And when you truly feel this, Not merely think it, but feel it down to your bones. A great release takes place. The self disappears, just as the fist disappears. When the hand opens, there is no longer the knower, only knowing, no longer the feeler, only feeling, no longer the doer, only doing. You cease being a puppet, desperately trying to control the play. Because you see, you are the play, you are life itself, dancing its own dance. And from that moment on, the whole game changes completely. And then, when you've grown accustomed to living outside the tyranny of time and the illusion of the self, another quiet revolution takes place within you. You stop doing what human beings seem to love most, drawing lines. We are absolute masters of division. We slice the world neatly into pairs of opposites. Good and evil, right and wrong, holy and sinful, us and them. But as your eyes begin to clear, you realize that trying to have the good without the bad is as absurd as trying to have up without down, inside without outside. Light and darkness, life and death, they aren't enemies. They're two sides of the same coin. They dance together. But society thrives on conflict. It whispers. Pick a side, join the army of light, fight against the darkness. And so we march proudly into moral crusades, fighting noble wars against abstract monsters called communism, capitalism, or whatever particular devil happens to be fashionable this century. Civilization has turned life into a grand battle. And the tragic irony is this: most of the world's worst horrors have been committed by people with the best intentions. Those who believed they were fighting for righteousness. Suddenly you see the paradox in all its glory. To seek the good without the bad is like trying to create a stick with only one end, or a coin with only one side. Light and darkness are not adversaries. Light defines the dark, and darkness reveals the light. They are inseparable dance partners. You can't have the North Pole without the South. If you break a magnet in two, you don't end up with a lonely North and a lonely South. You simply create two new magnets, each with both poles. Intact, they are by nature inseparable. Life and death, joy and sorrow, success and failure. These aren't opposing forces at war. They are the pulses, the oscillations, the graceful curves of one continuous movement of energy. And when you understand this, not merely as an idea, but as an immediate living truth, the war inside your mind comes to an end. You stop wasting your energy trying to fix reality, trying to erase the half of existence you don't happen to like. That, you see, is as futile as trying to keep the mountain while getting rid of the valley. When your energy is no longer consumed by fighting ghosts, it becomes free. Free for real, tangible creation. Instead of fighting for peace, you begin living peacefully, perhaps by simply being kind to your neighbor. You no longer stand on one side of the dance, waving your flag of virtue. You become the dance itself. And when the battle between opposites begins to quiet down, you'll notice something remarkable happening inside you. The strain, that subtle tension woven through everything you do, begins to soften. The grim determination, the invisible clenching of the will, slowly gives way to a strange and effortless grace. You begin to experience what the Chinese call Wu Wei. It's a beautiful term, so often misunderstood. It doesn't mean doing nothing. It means not forcing, acting in harmony with the flow of things. As clouds drift across the sky, as grass grows, without being told to. You see, our society is obsessed with the will, with the gospel of effort. We worship a strange god called self-control. We've built an internal dictatorship where one part of the mind plays the commander and the rest becomes the obedient troops. And so we live our lives perpetually tensed, muttering, I must wake up early. I must concentrate. I must be better. The result? A chronic tightening of the soul, a fatigue so deep it becomes invisibly, because we've mistaken strain for strength. We spend our days with the mind trying to boss itself around a comic little loop with no way out. Here's the great paradox. The very moment you say, I must relax, you've already failed. Because the effort to relax is itself tension. Trying to be natural is the most unnatural thing in the world. So how do you escape? Not by trying harder, but by seeing the utter futility of trying. Awakening dawns when you realize you cannot will your heart to stop beating, you cannot decide to fall asleep, and you cannot hold your breath forever. The first lesson of Wu Wei is surrender, a quiet whisper that says, I give up. But this is not the resignation of despair. It's the letting go of an illusion, the illusion that there is a little me, separate from life, struggling to take control of it. And the instant that surrender happens, right action begins to flow on its own. You're no longer the doer. Things are simply done through you. Decisions still arise, but they come effortlessly, spontaneous, unburdened, like waves forming and breaking on the sea. You stop being the frantic swimmer, thrashing against the current, and you realize, with the quiet joy of recognition, that you are the current, and then there comes something that's almost impossible to describe, yet it is the most real thing of all. Awakening is not a new philosophy you adopt, nor a spiritual belief you decide to believe in. It is a transformation, literal, biological, a shift in the very circuitry of your nervous system. It is a change in the way you see. Have you ever felt as though you were living behind a veil, a thin film made of thoughts, words, and ideas? We don't actually see the world. We see the labels we've pasted all over it. We've been bewitched by language, hypnotized by the symbols society has handed us. And we've made one fundamental mistake. We confuse the description of the world with the world itself. It's as if we've been trying to eat the menu instead of tasting the meal, but one day, suddenly, quietly, that veil lifts, the glass shatters, and the world bursts into radiance. Not in a supernatural sense, but in the most ordinary, astonishing way. You begin to see things as they truly are. Everything glows from within. A simple teacup on the table is no longer a cup. You see the curve of its form, the dance of light across its porcelain glaze, the shadow it casts like a whisper on the wood. You see it, not as an object among other objects, but as a miracle utterly itself. This is what the Zen masters call tathata, suchnes. It means seeing things just as they are. My favorite translation of tathata is perhaps the simplest one. Dada, the gaze of a child before language begins, before the mind divides, before the world is chopped into categories of good and bad, useful and useless, nameable and nameless. It is perception unclouded by thought, and in that clarity, something extraordinary happens. The eternal energy of the universe, what physicists describe in equations, is suddenly felt pulsing through your own nerves. What the scientists know in theory, you begin to feel. You stop thinking about the world, and you start experiencing it directly, intimately, wordlessly. You no longer stand apart. Looking at life through concepts, you and life are now one continuous act of seeing. And as the world grows luminous, another paradox unfolds. The more deeply you love life, the more peacefully you accept death. You stop fighting the simple truth that everything must pass away. In our culture, death is the ultimate enemy. It's treated as failure, a dreadful accident to be delayed, hidden, and denied at any cost. We've been taught to fear it as the absolute end, the total erasure of that precious thing we call me. And that fear, the fear of facing a future that never comes, is the deepest chain that binds us. Anxiety is, at its root, nothing more than the refusal to die, a frantic, trembling attempt to hold still what must move, to resist the unceasing rhythm of change. But once you've seen that the self is only a story, that you are the universe, momentarily expressing itself as a human being, the terror begins to lose its grip. You discover something wondrous. Death is not the opposite of life. It is the very principle of life. For the new to appear, the old must vanish. For one note to sound, the previous must fade into silence. The past must be continuously released again and again and again. Your disappearance, that thing you once dreaded, is revealed as seasonal, rhythmic, natural, just as the earth needs open space to exist. Life itself requires death to renew its song. You are as much the darkness of the cosmos as you are the light that flickers within it. Each defines and completes the other. So death is no longer something to be endured. It becomes an opportunity, a once-in-a-lifetime adventure, you might say, the ultimate letting go. Why not, after all, treat dying as the grandest experience of all? As Goethe once wrote, "He who does not know how to die and be reborn is but a poor traveler upon this dark earth." To die and be reborn is not a miracle of resurrection. It is the art of living completely, moment by moment, because you are no longer haunted by the ghost of an ending. In that freedom, life at last becomes whole. And finally, when you have come to rest in the present moment, when you have become one with the universe, ceased your battles with opposites, acted without forcing, seen the world as it truly is, and made your peace with death, what remains? Not some solemn, saintly state of enlightenment. What remains is play. You discover the ultimate secret, great cosmic joke. This entire existence has no purpose whatsoever, and that is its supreme beauty. Our society is hopelessly addicted to purpose. Everything you do must have a reason, a motive, a goal. You go to school to get a degree. You work to make money. You earn money to buy a house. And you buy a house to do something else next. Always something next. It's a system that cannot tolerate the idea of doing anything, simply for its own sake. But look at nature. Does the flower bloom for a reason? Does the bird sing for a reward? Do the waves crash upon the shore to accomplish something? Of course not. They do it out of sheer exuberance, a spontaneous overflow of energy that is its own fulfillment. Existence itself is play, a completely purposeless yet profoundly meaningful dance. Purposeless here doesn't mean pointless. It means it doesn't require an external justification. It's like music. The point of music isn't to reach the final note. If that were the case, the best symphonies would be the shortest ones. And the point of dancing isn't to arrive at a particular spot on the floor. The point is the dance itself, every sway, every spin, every moment of motion. When you awaken, you stop treating life as a grim journey from point A to point B. You begin to see it for what it truly is. A piece of music, a dance. You discover a special kind of bliss. The Indians call Ananda. The joy of simply being. The laughter that arises when you realize that to live in harmony with the universe to express the Tao, you need do nothing more than live. Your actions become unblocked, spontaneous, like a ball floating downstream, going wherever the current carries it. You are free to let go of yourself because you've seen that every direction is the right one. You stop working on your mind with your mind, and you end that magnificent confusion, and at last you begin to play, not to achieve anything, not to become anyone, but simply for the pure, radiant delight of being alive. So then, after all of this, after time has dissolved, the self is shattered, the opposites have embraced, and life has become a dance. What happens next? Do you become a saint, a sage who retreats from the world, wrapped in incense and silence? Not at all. Spiritual awakening is not a step away from life. It is a return to life, but now with eyes that have been washed clean. You see, all along, society has been handing you a menu, a beautifully printed menu full of elegant descriptions, promising the most exquisite dishes imaginable. And they've told you that if you study that menu hard enough, if you analyze every ingredient, memorize every word, one day you'll taste the feast itself. And so we spend our lives chewing on the menu. We debate the recipes, we compare the flavors of words, of concepts, of doctrines, but we never actually taste the food. Awakening, in the simplest terms, is the moment you put the menu down and take your first bite, and in that instant you discover a freedom so complete that it needs no change, no improvement, no goal. You may go on living exactly as before, working, paying bills, joining in society's little rituals. But inside, something fundamental has shifted. You play the game, but the game no longer plays you. All the old systems of control, the promises of heaven, the threats of hell, the goals of progress, the glittering prizes of success, they all collapse under their own weight. Because you see, from the very beginning, you were never outside of paradise. You were home the whole time. And here lies the final secret, the greatest joke the universe ever told on itself. There is no answer waiting at the end of the road, because there was never a question to begin with. The entire search, this grand adventure of meaning, was based on a false assumption that you were missing something. The ultimate meaning of life? A Zen master might simply smile and say, "Mew." Or perhaps he'd call it the sound of one hand clapping. A riddle designed to exhaust the intellect until it finally gives up and looks, at last, at what's right here, what's always been here. It's so obvious, so simple, so utterly beyond words. The truth that you are not a drop in the ocean. You are the entire ocean in a single drop. So, my friend, which of these 7 signs resonates most deeply with you? I'd love to hear what you felt stirring within yourself. Leave your reflection below. And if this little conversation opened a new window in your mind, give it a like, subscribe, and join me again as we wander further into this strange and wonderful mystery called being alive